All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Professional Volunteer Podcast. And what's up, Kara?
Hi.
How
Morning.
are you? Good morning.
Great.
You're great?
Yeah.
That's good. So I have a co-host with me today. Once you're on more than once, you go from guest to co-host. That's my new rule. I made that up myself. Yeah,
I like
step. And we are recording today on what is the first day of summer, and it is really nice in the Northeast right now. So we're up bright and early getting it done so we can, go out and do other things. But Kara was on a couple episodes ago. Those of you that remember and listened from Saint Florian Fitness, we had a good time, got a lot of good feedback. So we're going to dive into a few more topics today. Some requested, some not, but see where it goes, right?
Once you press play, you're a captive audience and we can say whatever we want.
Right, exactly. Pretty much. So watching your social, not that you put a ton of stuff on your social from your department, and right. I don't want to dive into your specific department because we know how that can go sometimes for everybody. So, but watching you guys, you've got what seems like a pretty good crew of people.
We do.
And it looks like you've got some nice equipment and some nice toys to play with.
Very fortunate, yes.
Which is always helpful. So we are going to talk a little bit more today about retention. And we can talk about recruitment too if we want. But the most listened to episode, I think, so far on the podcast, other than like my hello, welcome, this is me, and this is what I'm about. Number one, right? Because I think most people listen to number one before they listen to anything else to figure out who the hell this guy is, right? So is the recruitment and retention episode, which happens to be number two, but whatever. All right. But yeah,
he didn't peak at number two.
Right. But that has always been a hot topic in the volunteer fire service and remains to be a hot topic in the volunteer fire service.
Right.
And I think today, although we are thankfully, I don't want to jinx us and say coming out of the COVID crisis, we are slowly digging our way out of the COVID hole, right? And retention during the pandemic was difficult, I think. Yeah. So we're going to talk about retention and a little bit of recruitment. And then I've got a little request thing here. So what are some of your tips, or what do you see as valuable when we speak about retention in the fire service, keeping our members?
Yes. Well, I think that really the key to good, one of the most important things for good retention is good recruitment. Okay. I think that you can't really look at them as separate issues. Mm-hmm. I think that's a mistake that a lot of people may make. I know that there's some departments that have separate committees. They'll have a recruitment committee and then a retention committee. Right. And it really has to go hand in hand. So you can't really look at the recruitment or the retention piece without looking at what you're doing for recruitment. Mm-hmm. I think one of the traps that volunteer organizations can fall into is that you're looking for bodies, right? You want that quantity. You're like, we need help. And so that you may focus your recruitment drive on volume, and you may try to tap into a large amount of people at once rather than individualizing the experience for your volunteers. Mm-hmm. And that can really impact retention when you're not really vetting your incoming members well, and you're not seeing like where their interest lies and what their availability and time commitment really is. Because as firefighters, and especially if you run EMS in your department too, the education piece is very, very time consuming. And I think that when you're recruiting, you don't want to shy people away from it, but at the
Right.
same time, if you're not honest about what they're getting into, you're probably not going to retain them.
Good point.
So, I mean,
I agree.
that's the one, big thing. I think that when we're going out in the community and talking to people, and trying to gauge their interest level, it's important to talk about what is available at your department. Some departments have just a social club membership. Some departments have auxiliary.
Mm-hmm.
Some departments have, just a separate EMS side or just a separate fire side. So one of the things that's really important is to make sure that you're vetting those folks to see what their interest level is and how you're going to keep them with you. Because all the roles are important. It's not to say that just because you have somebody that doesn't want to do interior firefighting or doesn't want to be an EMT, doesn't mean they can't add value to your volunteer organization. I mean, you can get somebody in there that wants to be a member, but not a firefighter, and has like a really, is really capable with IT, or is, really capable with mechanics, or, whatever it may be. So there's value in everyone. I really think that volunteerism in our country is got such a long history and is so important and vital to people. People want to feel that they're part of a community. And as we continue on with technology and things get more and more virtual, I think that there is that big feeling and need for connection. So we can look at this, separation, like what happened with COVID, where everybody had to like stay in their homes and everything was virtual and that kind of thing. And as we start to slowly come out of it, use that as a little bit of a marketing strategy to say, how can we reconnect as a community and how can we get out there and serve others? And I think that that's a way to start to gauge interest.
So do you think, and this is a statement that is commonly used in the volunteer fire service, do you think there's a place for everyone in the organization? Have you heard that statement?
Yes.
Okay. Me too. A gazillion times over the years. There's a place for everyone in the organization. And I partly agree, right? You just laid out a ton of different things that an individual can do within a volunteer organization. Right. And, my organization is one of those organizations. We have a lot of different avenues that somebody can contribute. Right. We've got the auxiliary side. We have a ladies auxiliary, and then we have a fire department auxiliary. So obviously the ladies auxiliary is lady specific. And then we have the fire department auxiliary where anybody can join. Right. My daughter's a member of the fire department auxiliary. She wanted to get involved. She wanted to help out, but she's not interested in being a firefighter right now.
Right.
Who knows? Maybe that'll change. But honestly, she doesn't have time to be a firefighter right now.
Right.
So that's a big part of it. But mentioning some of the other things that you mentioned, we've got a lot of other avenues that somebody can come in and contribute. We've got, obviously we have interior, we have exterior and scene support, we have fire police, we have a lot of wildland resources. We have the UAS and the drone team, which is like is another whole,
Yeah.
And the problem, I think, we typically, whenever we take on one of these new initiatives, I think one of our faults as organizations is, who do we usually fill those new initiatives with? The same dozen people that do everything.
Yeah.
Right. The same dozen people that do everything.
Right.
So, then when I want to, put my drone up in the air or count on my UAS, I'm looking around and I'm going, well, crap, I don't want to pull that guy or that girl because they're like on the front line fighting the fire right now. I don't want to send them back to do something else, So, so there definitely are, in today's day and age, a lot more places where we can utilize people.
Yes.
But is that statement, there's a place for everyone, correct? I still don't know if it is or not.
Yeah, it's, making broad statements like that can really, you kind of fall victim to the interpretation of it. Right. You have to really take an honest look at what your organization is like. Like you have lots of different venues. My department is fairly small, And we do have some different venues and different options for people, but we also have, you know, our rules, New York State's, because we're in New York State, we're in Central New York, PF. Let's bring that up.
I thought it was you said upstate the last time. You took total credit for upstate. So I thought it was upstate.
I said, you think you're upstate, but you're really not.
Okay. All right. Okay.
But anyways, we have New York State rules and regulations that we need to follow, and for both EMS and fire.
Sure.
So in following those rules, you may inadvertently have people that are excluded from that, right? Like if you're not going to be able to pass your physical or, you know, and you want to be an interior firefighter, but you can't pass your medical physical, we can't have you interior firefighting. So it's, to me, I hear that a lot, and I know it's like kind of the tagline for people's recruitment and retention, but I think it's a little bit too broad, you know, and I just like the fitness stuff, for me, I think it's so important to individualize. And, you know, if you make these broad sweeping statements and then you can't really back it up, you're kind of losing credibility, and that's how you lose volunteers too.
Right. And here's why I think that statement is too broad, because when it comes down to it, you do count on your members for more than what they were recruited for. That's usually how we operate. And it's very difficult when you're in a leadership role, if you've got a dozen people that show up for an alarm, and now in your head or on your phone or wherever it is, you've got to do like a quick roll call. Okay, who's capable of what can, you know, what can everybody accomplish? So if you have folks that are specific to specific tasks, you're biting off a lot of challenges there, because again, most of our organizations have a standard set of rules and regulations and bylaws. It's not like we have specific rules and regulations for folks that can only do job A and B, and then another set of regulations for people that can do jobs A, B, C, and D, right? So everybody is everybody is held accountable to the same standard almost when it comes to how they meet their points, how they stay active, whatever it is, right?
Right. So, and I think that something that is difficult too is that a lot of times we're not telling members those kind of things up front, because we're so excited about like getting them in the door, getting them pumped up. You know, you see like the recruitment videos, you know, fighting a structure fire every day. And, you know, there's like, they're firing you, you know, like,
right.
You're getting them all pumped up, you know.
Right.
And,
nobody shows you guys rolling out to the scene, handing somebody a Band-Aid and going back in service, right? They don't, those videos are never on the highlight reel, but that's real life.
They don't show like, you know, that same address coming up over and over again. And you're like, oh, here we go. But so, you know, they're trying to get people in the door and that kind of thing. When it comes to retention, really having open communication and listening to your members becomes really crucial. So if you have somebody that has something going on with their family, for example, if they have family or whatever, and they're saying to you, I'm not going to be able to make my drill numbers or whatever, and you're like, well, you have to, you know, then they're going to be like, well, I can't because I have something going on with whatever. And if you're not open to making some accommodations, but having that conversation like, yeah, I get it. You know, this month is a tough month for you. That's awesome. You know, that you came and talked to me about it. Can we make a commitment that next month you're going to make all of your drills? Or can I, as an officer, meet you down here for a mini drill? Like, can we just like crap open the hydrant in the back and just work on fittings and whatever? Or can we do like a mini drill so that we can get you the credit? Like, what can I do to help you stay active and stay involved and not get disillusioned and get into that comfort zone of, if I skip drills and skip drills and skip drills, I'm not vested, and then nobody's following up on me with it, so then I don't really care, so then I'm just going to drop out.
Right.
And that's really huge, especially for volunteer departments, because of the potential cost and investment to get members, you know, outfitted in gear, and the training, and, you know, the time that the active members have to put into the new members, you know. So there's really like a big, you know, weight that you have to level with some of your folks. But I think having that open communication is very crucial, and not condemning them, especially if they're coming to you and saying that I have this situation going on.
That's a huge piece, right? A huge piece. And I think I might have talked about it on one of the short Friday episodes, but you need the care, right?
Yeah.
And you need to have some investment in your membership, especially when you're in a leadership position, right? The organization the entire leadership of the organization should have some investment in their membership if they want their membership to continue to, strive and grow, and they want to retain members. But, people, not everybody can take it as seriously as we may like them to. All right. Not everybody is going to dedicate 100% of themselves, even though we would love to see that. Right. And that's kind of what we're usually on here preaching is, be a professional, dedicate yourself, 100%, 100%. Well, that's not real life for everybody. So we can't, but you know what? 50% of somebody could be a very valuable piece of an organization. Right.
Yeah.
And if we don't take the time to know like what's going on, that was, I think that was my premise behind the kind of rant. I kind of call Friday mutual aid episodes almost like rants, because like a topic pops into my head and it's like hit record and just go, but that was kind of the premise behind it was, when you see somebody that was around all the time or around fairly consistently, and all of a sudden you start to see their numbers go down, you're failing as a leader if you don't pick up the phone and call them up and be like, yo, what's up?
Right.
What's going on? How come you haven't been around?
Right.
And then if they give you a legitimate, like a legitimate reason, like, oh, sorry, I've been working extra hours, or we just had a baby, or my wife's pregnant, or whatever the hell it is, I got injured outside the fire department, I got injured, you're failing them if you don't do something to help them through that time, if you want to retain them as a member.
Right.
If you don't care, well,
if you don't care, your retention isn't an issue for you, because if you don't care, you're not going to have any retention.
Right.
And even though, like, this is one of the things that I really preach is, even though it's a volunteer organization, you have to still treat your volunteer employees, like it's a professional organization, because it's a very serious thing and a huge responsibility to be a volunteer fire department. And if you have a performance issue with someone, you have to be knowledgeable and skilled in how to address that. And you can't, I think one of the other big mistakes that really impacts retention is that if you have an issue with one firefighter or two firefighters or whatever, that are not up to par or whatever the situation is, and then you go into a meeting as a leader and say, I'm not mentioning any names, but we all have to do XYZ, and you can't take a truck if you're not up to your operator's training, or, whatever. If you make these blanket statements, everybody in that room, whether they've done anything or not, gets that like gut check, like, oh, he's talking about me, and that impacts retention a lot too, because if you're working really hard and you're doing the right things and you're making all your drills, you don't want to go to a meeting and hear and get admonished for somebody else's lack of professionalism or shortcomings or whatever's happening. So as a leader, if you can have an open conversation with somebody about a performance issue, it's going to carry over to the whole department. It's professional. It's what you need to do. Everybody needs to be an adult. If you can't address performance issues when the community's safety is on the line, you're probably not ready to be in an officer's position or a leadership position. When I first when I was co-captains with EMS, and I first started, I really made a lot of mistakes as a young leader.
We all do. That's
right.
That's normal, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I, especially since I'm the only female in my department, I was the only female officer. I'm still the only female officer. But in that role, I really thought that I mean, I came in way too hot, my first like month, I just
Yeah.
thought I need to establish myself, because of some of the history of the department and, the uniqueness of my situation. I really wanted to come in and really, demonstrate that I was in charge and was taking over. And that did not obviously go well. That doesn't go well for anybody, but you don't know until you don't know. And if you can admit your mistakes and learn from your experience and let it make you better, that shows to your crew.
Sure.
If you can say, I didn't handle that well, I want to handle it better, let me talk to you about it. That goes a lot farther with your crew as well. And so I think the leadership team, however people do their leadership, and there's different ways volunteer organizations do that, the leadership team needs to be prepared to man up and have a lot of self-recognition and not be emotionally tone deaf when they're dealing with their volunteers.
Sure. So there's two things you said. One of them, there's one word that's commonly used that has always frustrated the hell out of me, and it kind of goes along with one of the things you just said. That's they. Okay. Yeah. They, right? Because it drives me nuts when somebody won't take responsibility for a concern or a statement or whatever it is, so they come to you with, they think you're doing this, or they don't like the way this is happening. Right. And, years, you talk about growing, and years ago, that would drive me like nuts. Mm-hmm. I'd lose sleep over, well, who's they? What's the problem? What am I doing wrong? Or what are we doing wrong? Or what's the organization doing wrong? Now my standard answer to that, when somebody says, they, I'm like, well, who's they?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I really can't. Well, then I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, we can't talk about it unless we can talk about it.
Yeah, unless we're willing to put some names and some personalities and some to the concern. I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
If I don't know who they are, I can't address them, or I can't make the situation better. So and that goes both ways. So what you said about making broad statements instead of addressing a specific individual when it comes to something, standing up on the floor of a meeting. And look, I've done this. Again, we admit our mistakes. We admit the things that we do. I've done this because at times, let's face it, it's just easier. Right? Or you're trying to walk that fine line of not offending somebody valuable, right? By going right to them, because you're not sure how they'll take it. So you're like, all right, instead of going right to the person, let's do this. This time, I'm just going to make a broad statement to everybody.
Right.
I don't know, response order or something. Somebody rolled out of the house with the wrong truck first. Yeah. Okay. Instead of just going and saying, hey, did you check the list? And, you're like, hey, guys, remember, we got to check the response order, So you make that broad blanket statement just because, it's easier.
Right.
And I've done that.
Stuff like that's important for everybody to know, right? Like, so if it's valuable for everyone to know that, and it's a valuable reminder, then, those kinds of things, isn't as big of an issue as one person, did XYZ, and we're going to talk to the entire membership instead of going to that person and saying, hey, let's talk about this, and I think it's, one of the things that people are always so afraid to say is, hey, this is going to be hard to talk about.
Sure.
Preface it. Preface it and say, hey, I got to talk to you about something that's difficult to talk about.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And, I think it's also, again, with the performance kind of piece, if you were at your paid job and your boss called you in and said, hey, I got to talk to you about something, there's usually some ground rules. You're not going to blow up at your boss. You're not going to scream at your boss, or there's going to be consequences to that.
Sure.
And volunteer organizations really should not be any different to that. And I think speaking up and talking about it before the conversation starts is perfectly acceptable and fine, and shows the person that you respect them.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Saying,
look,
hey,
I said this on a couple of times before, look, when I had to make the phone calls to the older membership when we locked everybody down at the beginning of the pandemic, those are the worst phone calls I've made in years, because first of
Right.
all, I didn't want to call those guys. I didn't want to say, you guys can't respond anymore.
Right.
And I knew some of them because they're there all the time. It's not like I'm calling somebody that doesn't show up. I'm calling people
Right.
that like are always there, So and most of them understood. They were upset, but they understood, they're like, oh, this sucks, but I get it.
Right.
And then I had a couple of them come back to me with like, well, you can't do that.
Yeah.
I'm like, and pretty much exactly what you said. I'm like, listen, if you think I want to be making this phone call right now,
Right.
like you're sadly mistaken.
Right.
Like this is not how I wanted to start my day today, was by
Right.
calling 6 or 8 of my most dedicated members to tell them you got to stay home, and I can't even tell you until when.
Right.
I'm just
Right.
telling you got to stay home.
Right.
Um, but then on the opposite side of the spectrum, and it kind of, I think that's a nice segue into the next thing I wrote down when you were talking was, so you've got those other members that do the bare minimum,
Right.
right? And every year it's our responsibility as an organization or as leaders to find them the points to continue to stay active. Have you ever dealt with that or heard
Yeah.
or heard of that? It always seems to be this, the same few people.
Yeah.
And look, I don't feel that I'm in the role of pushing. I don't want to be in the role of pushing members away.
Right.
I feel that it's my responsibility and the organization's responsibility to try to keep people,
Yeah.
not
Absolutely.
push them away.
Right.
Whatever the situation is, it's our job to keep them. But for how long do you do that? Like when if year after year after year after year, you have the same people coming to you and saying, "Oh, I know I only missed it by 4, but what can we do?"
Right.
But meanwhile, you have guys that like I could sell points every year, and half of my other, and
Yeah.
probably 80 to 90% of our people could sell points at the end of the year. How do
Right.
you address those people? Because that's a part, you're retaining, you're trying to retain them, you're trying to work with them, but when do you have the conversation and be like, listen, why are you in this?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things that I've been really active in and really tried to keep going is mentorship. You
Yeah.
have your leadership folks, your, maybe like the board members or whatever, and then you have your line officers. But there's other people in the department that have a lot of valuable knowledge that might not be in an active leadership role.
Right.
And if we can use those folks to mentor some of the newer members, or B, some of the members that maybe are not making as much, aren't as active as you'd like them to be,
Right.
and you think that they're still interested, giving them a mentor to kind of oversee them and check in with them can be really valuable. And I think that's a huge retention tool that I'm not sure how many departments are really using, because it sounds really work intensive and difficult to set up, but it really isn't. If you look at around your department, you have a few senior guys, right? That are very knowledgeable. They know where the stuff is on the rigs. They're not really in leadership roles. Maybe they're not interested in being an officer, but you can tap them and say, hey, I'm having a hard time connecting with this member. They're interested, but I'd like to see if I can get somebody to, just kind of take them under their wing and offer them. It might be less intimidating for that member than
Sure.
dealing directly with the officer, And so if they have somebody that they can call and say, hey, can you meet me down at the station on a Tuesday because I can't make drill on Wednesday, and the mentor is open to it and amiable to it, maybe you can get some drill credits going that way.
Sure.
There's options to do. But having a mentor within the department, I had a mentor when I first started, and he's like a bonus father to me. I mean, if it wasn't for him, I mean, there was times that I was definitely struggling, and I didn't necessarily feel comfortable going to the officers that I had at that time. But I could call him and say, I need help with this, or can you talk to me about this, or whatever it is. And it was just a little bit more comfortable for me or in the beginning to reach out
Sure.
to somebody that I felt was, not in like that leadership role,
Mhm.
but could help me,
Yeah.
and so having a mentor program, it can be very straightforward. It doesn't have to be super involved. You get a handful of guys in a meeting that says, as a mentor, you're going to touch base with your mentee. You're going to be willing to meet them at the department if they took a class and they need help getting their SCBA refilled when they
Mhm.
get back. You're going to be their partner on like live burn training or whatever, so that
Mhm.
they have a senior person to go in with that they feel comfortable with. If you just set like a few criteria for what it means to be a mentor, that helps retain your more long-standing members, because they feel valuable and would like to pass on their knowledge to somebody else, but maybe don't have time or desire to be in a leadership role. And then it helps you retain your newer members or your members that aren't as active, because they have a connection with someone.
Sure.
And I think that is something that it's really important to promote in the volunteer service.
Yeah,
Is the
I agree.
mentorship.
So, and again, because we have so many groups though, right? So that
Right.
addresses, that helps you with your newer members. It helps you with your senior members that are well educated and vested and know what's going on, but might not want to get involved with a leadership role. We still have a group though there that, and that's kind of the group I was referring to. We still have a group there though that isn't as vested, isn't new, maybe isn't quite senior yet, but they're somewhere in the middle, whatever. Years of service really doesn't matter, right?
Right.
But they're not doing their part, right? And this is the problem. I think if people could take a step back out of what's going on in their own mind and look at it from somebody else's vision, right? So when I look at somebody like that as the chief currently, right? Even though I don't want them to go anywhere and I want to keep them and I want to keep their knowledge and I want to keep their expertise and whatever it was that made them originally come to the table that has kind of floundered. All right. And now every year it's like, okay, how are we going to keep you active? Okay, let's put you on probation for another 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just a constant cycle. When I'm looking at them, and this is what I think they need to realize, when they show up on the scene of an incident,
Right.
I'm now not looking at them all the time as an asset. I'm looking at them as a liability because
True.
they're not showing up. They're not coming to training, right? And they're just barely scraping by every single year, if they're even scraping by based on the organizational bylaws, right?
Right.
And I know, look, I've had this conversation with people from all over the place that have the same challenge. Now, there's lots of departments that look, it's steadfast rules. You don't make the rules, you don't make the points, you're done. They don't care. You're out.
That's true. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very cut and dry for them.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to treating it like a performance issue. And then you have to make the effort to maybe do even go as far as writing a little performance plan.
Yeah.
And say, I need to, what can you give me in the next, whatever your time frame is, 6 weeks, 6 months, whatever it is, what can you do for me to make this work?
Yep.
And what can I do for you to make this work? And you write it all out and then you both sign it. And then if it doesn't happen, then you say, hey, unfortunately, we have to find a different solution here. Maybe you have to move out of active firefighting and we'd love to have you involved in the auxiliary. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you have to go to being a social member, or, hey, can we call you when we need help with fundraising or committee activities?
Yeah.
So you just have to look at how much you're putting into one member versus are you retaining a larger amount of your members with the things you're offering them.
Yeah.
Those decisions are hard to make.
Absolutely. And look, what I don't like about holding that hard line like some organizations do, all right, is that can affect you in the long run. That can affect your company morale, depending on who it is that you're cutting off, right?
Yeah.
That can affect your public perception, because let's face it, it's never the person's fault, right? It's
Right.
not that I never showed up. I didn't come
Right.
around. I didn't go to training. I didn't get my physical. I didn't do
They
this.
didn't
I
like
didn't do that.
me. Everyone bullies
Right,
me.
right.
Yeah.
It's never that. It's, you know, the story at the diner is, oh, the chief's an asshole. This is
Yeah.
that. The organization sucks.
Yeah.
Like that's how it goes out into the public. It's not like, look, I didn't have time. It's not their fault. It's my, you know, look,
Right.
I didn't give what I should have been given, and we needed to part ways. You know, that's I don't know. I guess that's not an easy conversation, or it's not glorious.
No, and it's not. But honestly, if people have that very narrow worldview,
Yeah.
that their behaviors and actions don't have an impact on a larger group, it's likely that that is their worldview and how they operate in the world across the board. That's
True.
probably how they operate at their regular job. That's probably how they operate within their family structure, whatever that may be. And it's definitely how they're going to continue to operate in your organization. Having a recognition of that and making the decision of, yes, I'm going to meet them where they're at. I'm going to let them know it's your responsibility to make your points or make your drills or whatever your regulations are for your department. I will help you. I will be a resource for you. But ultimately, I need you to step up and achieve this goal. And if they can't do it and you aren't able to continue to have them on, giving them an option of, can we find you some other place? And then beyond that, you may just have to take the heat on it, you know. But I still believe that overall, if you don't have that kind of vibe and narrow worldview on your team, it's going to benefit your retention, really. Because again, if they are acting like that with you and with the leadership, they're definitely acting like that with everybody else. And they're
Yeah.
probably not pulling their weight on the fire ground, and they're not
Sure.
pulling their weight on EMS calls, you know. And so is that a valuable person to be able to keep, despite whatever knowledge or skills they may bring to the table? You know,
Right. Right.
unfortunately, sometimes shit just doesn't work out.
Right. Well, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
And that's it. You don't like having those conversations, you know, because again, most of us have some sort of relationship, you know,
right,
friendly relationship aside from that's one of the great things about being a part of the organization, right? Is turns into a family and friends. Yeah.
right,
Mostly, not all the time,
right.
you know, and sometimes it's hard to have those conversations. You know, so we almost have to be, we almost have to be partially a human resources department in today's
You really
day.
do. And
Yeah.
it's important to, I mean, when we're like, as firefighters, you know, learning and studying about fireground tactics, and we're learning about, you know, EMS protocol updates and things like that. If you're in a leadership role, you should also be spending some time learning about human resources issues
Mhm.
and, you know, team building and some
Sure.
of those other skills that we as firefighters don't think of, but can be immensely helpful in your organization if you have somebody in your leadership team that is knowledgeable about that.
Right. Right. And look, some leaders in some organizations are uncomfortable having uncomfortable conversations.
Yep.
I think that's a pretty fair statement to make. And I'm sure you know, in the fitness side of things, I'm sure you see it, right? I see it from the instructional side of things and the fitness side of things, you know, that when somebody shows up and they're like, hey, I'm here to be an interior firefighter, and you're looking at them like, okay, you
Yeah.
know, and you know, that statement sounds so negative, but it's they usually got to that place because somebody along the way in whatever organization they're from did not want to have that hard conversation, you know, because they're afraid, you know, they're afraid of what they can say, what they can't say, you know, they're afraid to say to somebody, you know, listen, let's talk about what that means. All
Right.
right. And where you are currently in your personal journey. Right.
Right. And in terms of like the physical health thing, that's where you have the, you know, regulations to back you up a little bit too.
Sure.
Like, you know, you have to, and some departments have some sort of like a CPAT, even in volunteer, or they have like a total on-air consumption drill that
But
you have to
very,
pass.
very, very few,
Right.
very,
Right.
very few in the volunteer world had any sort of
Correct.
physical. It's like if
Correct.
you pass, like the holy grail is if you pass your OSHA physical. I mean,
Right. Right.
I passed my OSHA physical for years with a freaking heart issue that if I didn't
Nobody.
tell them I had it, they would have never even knew I had it. Right.
Right. And like annually at our department, you have a physical and a urine screening, and then you have an EKG
Yeah.
right there in the bay. You got to have an EKG,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, so some departments are doing stuff like that. Some departments aren't doing anything at all, you
Right.
know? And so you're assuming that risk of that firefighter, if they are not in good physical condition, and you're saying, sure, you can be interior, you know, like hop right in.
But then they show up, they show up for training and the chief's like, well, he passed his OSHA physical. And you're like, bro, the guy can't hold himself off the ground on his hands and knees,
Right.
Well, that's
right.
for you to figure out.
Yeah. 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 That really becomes a difficult conversation to have for most people, right? And you have career guys that are not in good physical shape, and they're sometimes they got a union behind them or whatever, and you have firefighters that are volunteers that have never done a physical thing in their life, but are just like a rhinoceros. They just want to bash in there and do whatever.
Yeah.
I think one thing that you can do is build in some of the PT and physical training stuff into your training schedule. I think that kind of sends a powerful message to say, we have to do this, and it make it like a requirement or whatever. You got to do it every year. Those kind of things have to come from leadership. You have to have those conversations with your leadership team to say, are we doing anybody a service by ignoring physical health and wellness? And again, going back to when you're recruiting them, having that conversation, saying, hey, a charge 2.5 is like 135 pounds.
Right.
Can you lift and drag 135 pounds right now?
Yeah.
And if you can't, are you willing to work towards that goal?
Right.
But I think like you do a disservice if you don't have a conversation about what firefighting is really like. Just like if you don't have a conversation about the emotional impact of firefighting and the impact that it can have on people's families and their family life.
Yeah. My hope whenever I'm involved in some sort of physical training and you see somebody struggling physically, not that they can't do the task, they don't know how to do the task. My hope is always that they're going to have that mental wake up call. Like the bells are going to go off and they're going to be like, ding, 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 ding. Oh crap. I can't breathe right now.
Yeah.
Come Monday or whatever day they decide, like, I need to make a change. The unfortunate thing is that most people, I guess, are just not programmed that way because they don't have that moment. They're like, like by the next morning they've forgotten about it already.
Like, oh, that was hard, but
that was hard.
Pretty good today. A couple of Advil.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So we've gone down a lot of different roads. I think it all ties back into, retention of members with some recruitment. We can dive into other recruitment things, probably a lot deeper, things that the organization can be doing. We'll save that for another day. But I did get a request over Instagram. Where's this brother from? I don't know, but from a gentleman named Mark. I'm not sure where in the U.S. he is. I'm assuming he's in the U.S. Listened to the podcast, had an idea, and his, regarding the training officer, hints and tips for drills, keeping the guys and girls motivated and into it, and just into the job itself. Mm-hmm. And I think that question ties into everything we're talking about.
Sure.
I also think that question ties heavily into the last few months that we're coming off of, because, look, keeping the membership that's been around involved during this pandemic is difficult enough.
Right.
If you took in anybody new, just prior to this pandemic hitting, those poor people were out there kind of floundering for 3 months, right? Because
Right.
we weren't training. We weren't, look, you could set them up with some online training, but there was no coming around the firehouse. There was no brotherhood. There was no, there was nothing. So they became a part of this organization, which was probably a pivotal time in their life that they're super excited about. And then all of a sudden it's like, boop,
Yeah.
shut
Yeah.
you off.
Yeah. And like classes got canceled.
Classes got canceled.
That was really tough. I mean, even at the academy, we had to send all the recruits home.
Yep.
And so then it's like you lose that momentum, and it's a bummer, and it's really hard because this was so unexpected, of course. And so many houses had never experienced anything like that before.
Right.
And so it was a big learning curve for everybody. But in terms of Mark's question, to talk about how to keep people motivated and how to get them when you're talking about doing trainings, I think one of the big things is buy-in. We're all volunteers, and you can get very easily into the habit of, okay, in May we do vehicle extrication drill, and July we do water rescue, and and you always do the same thing every single time.
Right.
And it's fine if you want to set up a framework like that, but I think it's also really important to have buy-in from your members. It can be something so simple, like we have a suggestion box in the radio room for training.
Okay.
So if people see something from another department, they see something on Instagram or YouTube or whatever the other departments across the country do. I mean, right, we have so much accessibility to each other now.
Sure.
We can see what everybody else is doing, and that's good and bad,
Yeah.
But so if somebody sees a drill and they're like, hey, we've never done this before, can we do this drill? And they're suggesting it. And then I think then instead of just taking it over, right, and doing the drill and saying whatever, go back to that person and say, hey, I saw that you suggested this drill. Do you want to be a part of bringing it to the station?
Sure.
That causes a tremendous amount of buy-in and is fairly simple to do. Also, I spoke about this last time you had me on for the EMS stuff. Having one of your members run the training. If they're an expert in care of diabetics, or if they have expertise in whatever, have them run the drill that day. And you take a step back. Having that buy-in and having people take ownership of the training that they're a part of goes a huge way.
Yeah, absolutely. All great ideas. And he asked about keeping everybody into the job itself.
Yeah.
This all ties into keeping everybody into the job itself. Now, you're fortunate where you come from. Like I said in the beginning of the episode, nice equipment, nice toys. We're extremely fortunate where I am, beautiful equipment, nice toys. Nothing really ever gets turned down. If I go to my board of fire commissioners with an idea, and as long as, everything is backed up with fact and information and a reason why, they never really turn anything down as far as, new things, new ideas, equipment, training, whatever it may be. And I'm super thankful for that, because I know that that's not real life. Like, there's a lot of organizations that are not that fortunate. Right. And I've had this conversation a couple times on the show with a few different guests. When your call volume is less than everybody else's, and you don't have all the shiny new stuff and the toys, it's a lot more difficult to keep people excited and into the job. But that does not mean that you're not valuable. It does not mean that that somebody is still not counting on your organization every time the alarm goes off, right? In your response district, right? People are counting on you. And that's what we need to keep driving home, right? That's what we need to keep driving home to our membership, is regardless of what our call volume is, regardless of whether the fact that our engine is a 2019 or a 1988, all right, we still have to be good at our job. And and I think consistently training, consistently explaining, keeping that message alive is a big part of of keeping people bought in.
Yes.
Keeping
Yeah.
them good at what they need to be good at. Right?
Absolutely. And, with fitness too, I say meet people, use what you have and do what you can do with it
Right.
every day. And
Sure.
and so if you have a group of people and, your equipment isn't like the best or the greatest, make it the greatest that you have.
Right.
Take pride in it, pull everything off of that truck, wipe down the shelves, make sure everything's clean, do that together as a team, which accomplishes people knowing where everything is, knowing the equipment well, finding any issues that you may not have found on the last call that have occurred, and bringing the team together to work together for that station pride aspect.
Yeah.
And that is so important to so many people. They want to have that station pride, no matter how many calls you run, no matter, what in your community. I think one of the huge things a lot of departments across the country have been doing with the COVID shutdown is taking the rigs out for graduations and birthday party drive-bys and things like that.
Yep.
You might not get a ton of calls, but if you can get in that rig and go out and see the community and show them that you're in support of them and you're there for them at a crazy time, that makes you feel good about giving your time to that organization.
Sure.
Is it exciting as a structure fire? Maybe not. But when you see that little kid waving at you and you see, that elderly person that hasn't had any visitors and
Right.
you're waving at them and their tears are rolling down their face, you're going to feel pretty good about yourself. And you're going to recognize that your role is very important and you're going to want to do more.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's all a huge part of the, keeping people into the job, keeping them motivated,
Right.
keeping them engaged. Because look, if you consistently train and like you said, keep things, up to speed and the way they should be, it doesn't matter how many runs you do a year. When you roll into that one big run of the year and everybody gets off and they're like a machine, like the job just gets done, they get off with their gear, they look professional, they do the job professionally. Or you go mutual aid to another organization, right? And maybe that organization is twice the size of your organization, maybe they run 3 times the amount of calls, but when you and your organization show up, everybody's like, whoa, look at these guys, because everybody gets off the rig, put together, tools in hand, ready to work,
Yep.
That speaks volumes. So it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter how busy or slow your company is. That shouldn't affect your ability to do the job or your members' ability to want to do the job. Sure, does it get frustrating at times? The guys like, oh, we're really going to do hose stretches again tonight? Yes, we are. Because, and it usually only takes 1 or 2 stretches, right? They're like, oh, okay, I can see why we're doing hose stretches again, right? Because I sucked at that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I took a class myself at, a month ago, and I did a couple search evolutions, and the way that they had the searches, set up for what we were doing, I sucked out on my first evolution. I was like, oh my God. And so then the next evolution that we went in, they're like, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, search, because I sucked out at it and I need to do it again, and so you may think, and that's how it goes. You may have a great search evolution or a great interior attack evolution at one drill, and then the next drill you think you've got all confidence in the world because you crushed it last time, and then it's a different set of circumstances and you can't get complacent, because complacency is what kills firefighters.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you're getting into those trainings and you're saying, well, we've already done this or whatever, it's like, yep, we're going to do it again. Because it has to become muscle memory and it has to be something that we're doing automatically and not thinking about. That's where the skill building really comes in. And that's where people get to see what they're capable of and what they need to work on.
Right. Absolutely. And one thing I would add to answer Mark's question is you also have to look at your organization as a whole. Look at your people that are showing up. There's a lot that goes into planning quality training. It's not the officers show up 5 minutes before the drill starts and decide what you're going to do at drill, right? frustrates the hell out of me. You need to
Yeah.
be, you need to have a plan. You need to come in with a plan. You need to show up early to make sure that you can put your plan together. And you have to have a plan B, because
Yeah.
you could have the greatest plan A ever. And if a dozen people that can't do plan A walk in the door that night,
Yeah.
you're screwed. What are you going to do? Send them home or be like, all
Right.
right, guys, we're going to sweep the floors again tonight. That's a
Right.
great way to push people away. So
Yes.
you need to look at your organization as a whole. You need to plan for your organization as a whole. You can't do, interior drills every single week and leave the fire police, the scene support guys,
Right.
the EMS people, all just kind of on the side, bullshitting and having their own conversations about whatever they're talking about, because that's not respectful to them and their time either.
No, training needs to be inclusive, and everyone has to feel like
Right.
they have a role in order to be vested.
Right.
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 And if you start from that framework, your trainings and skills are going to be a lot better.
Yes, absolutely. Now, if you are fortunate enough to have people that don't really care what the drill is, but mentally they're still vested, like those guys that show up and they know damn well they're not crawling around on the floor anymore. They're like,
Yeah.
I'm far from interior, but they could care, but they don't care. They still like to come and listen and learn and absorb new information. That's a home run. Take advantage of those people, because there's not a lot of them,
Right. And tap into those, because those are probably your mentors.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Good stuff here, I think. Any additions? What do you think? We went down a lot of different roads. We good job staying kind of within the,
yes,
we stayed within the framework. We didn't get go too far off base, I think.
Right. Well, I think that, one thing about retention is it's very multifaceted. You're not going to have a solution that works for every department. You're going to have a solution that works for every team. But you have to be open to different ideas and suggestions and different approaches. And you have to be cognizant that some of the approaches aren't going to work, and you have to maybe shift and try something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, and everybody's, you want to hear people's opinions. Right. Yeah. If you're in the leadership roles, you want to hear people's opinions. You should want to hear people's opinions. And if you're in that recruit firefighter, probationary firefighter role, because I know there's several folks in that group that listen week after week, don't think that your opinion is not valuable just because you don't have a lot of time on the job. Right. Maybe somebody is not seeing it from your vision, from your view.
Right.
So if you have feedback, like, a good leader will not push away valuable feedback from anybody, regardless of their years of service or where they sit in the organization.
Right.
They should want to hear it and want to listen to it. So I know one of the, I hear, well, I've only been in the organization for a year. Who am I to say anything?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're still a member, you're still a part of the organization. You're still, you're the future of the organization, right? So don't be afraid to, it's like safety, safety.
Yeah.
And you've got these kids who are like, oh, well, I'm a probie. I'm not going to say anything if I see something. What are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, if that's the culture in your organization, get out now and go somewhere else.
Yeah. One of the most important things that I saw before I became a lieutenant was my captain talking to one of our juniors, junior members. The juniors can come in when they're 16 in our organization. Mm-hmm. He's a junior member, very active, into it, really driven kid. He's actually my mentee.
PC now, by the way, I got to interrupt. PC now is age restricted. Just so
age restricted.
PC. I'm just trying to keep you compliant.
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome. Go ahead.
Very much. I've learned you so much. So one of the most important things I saw him do as a captain is say to the junior when he was getting on the engine, if you see me doing anything that you don't think is smart, or if you see something happening that you are concerned about, I want you to tell me. And this was when the junior first started coming, to calls and whatever with us. He invited him to give feedback as a junior. Mm-hmm. And that moment, when I witnessed that, I really put that into my memory bank, because I just thought it was so valid and important to really show that he recognized everybody's contributions.
Absolutely.
And that is so important for our volunteers to feel like their contributions are recognized and valued.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's admirable, and that's the way it should be, right?
Yeah.
Look, I would rather, I don't care who comes and says something. I would rather that they say something than keep it inside.
Yeah.
And, the wheels fall off because they were
Right.
afraid to share their opinion for whatever reason that would be. And also, look, that also to me is something you should look at personally, because if that's how people view you, that you're not approachable, that you're inapproachable, right? That's
a
like,
retention
I don't want
in of itself.
Yeah, I don't want to be inapproachable. Like, I want anybody that feels like they have something to say, I want them to be able to walk up and be like, hey, even if it has to start with what you said before, this is a tough conversation for me to have, but all right, well, let me sit down before
it's okay to preface conversations, you know.
For sure. Good stuff. All right, thank you very much for
having me on again.
Getting up early on a Saturday morning when you could be doing other things.
I had to run anyway.
Yeah. It's a warm one out where we are today.
It is.
So, give yourself another plug. What's going on? Things are opening. You should be getting back to work soon. We should all be getting back to work. Well, other work.
Yeah, I've been at work the whole time working at the hospital. I'm hoping that some of my sites where I train are going to be reopening soon as we move into our next phase in our state. We're doing phases. So as we move into our next phase, I think gyms and fitness stuff are going to be opening again. So I'm hoping that will include some of the sites that I train at, and hopefully it looks like right now Academy of Fire Science is going to be opening again as well. So then I'll be back to doing early morning PT with the recruits, which I absolutely love. And so, so hoping to get that fitness started. I think that if departments, want to reach out about health and wellness seminars and fitness seminars as things start to open up again, I encourage them to reach out to me at Saint Florian Fitness on Instagram and on Facebook to see if I can help, especially since things have been shut down for so long. Sometimes getting started again can be a little bit daunting. So I'm happy to be a resource to continue to try to reduce line of duty deaths due to cardiac health.
Very good. We'll have to get you down into the Hudson Valley.
Okay.
The lower part of the state from where you are. Yeah, it's good stuff. Are you in phase 3 now, or are you?
We're in, I think that we're moving into phase 4.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think you're one phase ahead. We're moving into phase 3 next week.
As of Friday, we were starting phase 4. I missed the governor's update on Friday, but I believe that that's where we were going, where we were headed.
Okay. Yeah. We're moving into phase 3 on Tuesday. We're one step below you because we're lumped in with Rockland and Westchester.
You downstaters.
Yeah, us downstaters. All right. Kara, thank you. Thanks for coming on again. I appreciate it. Thanks for co-hosting with me. We'll do it again.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Stay safe.
You too.